So good morning, everyone, to another Reach Out and Connect. Things are moving apace, aren't they? And we know that many businesses are gearing up to open from the 4th of July. So the Chamber of Commerce is working hand in hand with Merton Council to bring you really all the information that you require to help you follow the guidelines that have been issued by government. And it is very complex, isn't it? I mean, when I talk to businesses and try and digest this stuff myself, there really is a lot there. And I think, the hurdle that we've gone through, actually reopening and getting your business going and trading successfully, is the challenge that lies ahead for many businesses. So what we've got today is we've got Paul Milosevsky-Reed from the Trading Standards Regulatory Services Partnership at Merton Council. They trade, actually, that team operates across 3 boroughs, Richmond, Wandsworth and Merton. So obviously they have that exposure to many businesses across those boroughs. And Paul is going to update for us on what those in the hospitality sector need to be considering for reopening. And I know that's who is in the audience today. We're then going to follow Paul's input by an update from the Metropolitan Police, Steve Barr and Matt Bryan, which is all about really the public space, about queuing and all of those sorts of things. And then we'll do a question and answer. And then following that, we will have some updates from some of our members. At that point, Paul from the council will be leaving the meeting. We'll have some updates from members, and obviously we can talk more broadly as well at that point. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Paul to take us through the considerations, of which there are many. Welcome, Paul. Over to you. You need to unmute yourself if you can. Thank you.
Hi, good morning. Hi. You can hear me okay?
Yeah,
yep.
That's good. Right. Yeah.
Okay. So we're part of Regulatory Services. Our team includes all the services that you will be liaising with as part of thinking about COVID compliance and trade and outdoors, so licensing, environment, health, trading standards, pest, noise, all of those services are all under one roof. Obviously, we can never cover the guidance in significant detail in a webinar. We will cover some key points, but we are here to answer any more detailed questions and give much more tailored advice at any point. You can just give us a call. So, just a little disclaimer up front, we don't get any more advance notice of regulations or guidance than the public and businesses at large. So it has been fast moving, constant catch up as more and more businesses have opened, regulations constantly changing, but hopefully we all have picked out some key points that you can think about that will be helpful. So what I wanted to do is just give some context to what we'll be talking about. You'll have read the guidance yourself already, probably seen a lot of information already in the media, lots of conflicting information as well out there, depending on different policies in different countries. We've seen changes in terms of face coverings, changes in terms of 2 meter, 1 meter. So let's just give the context to what we're going to be talking about. So with the virus, every time that somebody's breathing, talking, coughing, sneezing, tiny water droplets are released. Obviously, if somebody has a virus, the virus can be contained within those droplets. And those just talking can launch thousands of droplets that can remain in the air for about 14 minutes. This is why there's been this 2 meter rule, because it was felt that that was enough distance to allow the droplets to pass harmlessly, drop to the floor, and avoid the person you're talking to inhaling them. There has been this change to 1 meter in certain regards, which I'll comment on, but that doesn't mean to say that 1 meter is suddenly safe. It's up to 10 times greater risk when you're 1 meter away than when you are 2 meters away. Most of the virus is typically spreading in enclosed indoor spaces. So it's reported that an analysis of over 7,000 cases of people that had the virus, only one was connected with outdoor transmission, and that is because of the free flow of air that dilutes the particles and makes it less likely others near you will inhale them. And 60%, so the majority of people with the virus don't display any symptoms at all. And these people will typically be working, shopping as normal, possibly without any idea that they're carrying the virus. So obviously we had 2 odd months of media saying, please sneeze, use your elbows. There was a lot of emphasis around not coughing, being mindful when you're sneezing, but this is it's a risk by people just talking and breathing, and most will not be aware they have it. So when you're designing policies, when you look at all these steps that you're having to take within your business, you may think there is a lot involved. Definitely, you really need to think of the minutiae of all the processes of how staff interact together, how staff interact with customers, and it is because it is something it's difficult to identify, and because it is airborne. So that's the context of what we're going to be talking about. So what do you need to do as a business? Well, every business has always had to do risk assessments. COVID is just one of many risks you need to consider. After the webinar, we will share a list of links, one of them to our webpage, which includes a risk assessment template. So that just gives you a kind of step-by-step process to go through. But what you're really looking at to help you fill in that risk assessment is looking at the government sector guidance. That has been created by scientists and industry experts, people that know your industry. They've sat around a table and thought about the processes, how you work, and they've created these guidelines to give you a step-by-step guidance of all the practical things that you need to think about to minimize risk in all the different ways that it affects your business. So you've got the government guidance. You'll then also potentially have guidance that's issued by your trade association as well. So that can sometimes go into a little bit more detail in particular aspects. It's important to emphasize there isn't a kind of one size fits all. There isn't it's not like we can give all pubs a risk assessment checklist or all restaurants, because each restaurant will be completely different depending how big your indoor and outdoor space is. And there's lots of other factors, how much ventilation you have, how your tables are configured. So this is why the risk assessment really needs to be a personalized exercise tailored to the exact circumstances, size of your business, number of staff, all of the different factors. The risk assessment template can only go so far in kind of helping you to think about each of those stages and where the kind of risk points are in your business. Thinking back to what I said about risk indoor versus outdoors, this is why there's a real push all the way from cabinet office right down to local government level, this push to, as far as practical, trade outdoors. As much as possible, restaurants, pubs, having an outdoor presence, using beer gardens, moving on to pavements, sharing, talking to your neighbors. If you haven't got pavement space, can you use their forecourts? None of this is easy. There's lots of impracticalities, lots of difficulties, but that's the push. Trading outdoors, customer queues, customer waiting areas, moving outdoors, as much as you can to minimize those risks. Now, going outdoors won't be possible for every business, and you won't be able to get all of your tables and chairs outdoors. So you will still be trading to some extent indoors. So you need to think about how do you minimize the risks indoors. I've talked generally about risk assessment. A couple of key things to think about is good ventilation. So having your windows and doors open in a way that allows the air to flow through. Now, depending on how your business is set up and where it's positioned, that might be opening the windows, doors at the front and at the back, or it may be the side. So whatever allows the air to flow freely through your premise is what you're aiming for. The other thing around ventilation is air conditioning systems. Do check those. Make sure that you've checked the filtration is up to date. It's good, because there has been risks, cases of within restaurants of one was 10 people sitting near an air conditioning unit. Somebody had coughed or just breathed. It got taken into the unit, and then everybody that was sitting next to the air conditioning unit picked up the virus. So it's important that your filters are clean and operational, operating correctly. Opening blinds and shades to help increase the amount of sunlight. So it's reported that 90% of the particles, coronavirus particles, are deactivated within 10 minutes of being exposed to UV rays. So getting as much air and sunlight into the premise. Using a humidifier, or be mindful of the humidity in the property. Ideally, you're aiming to get the humidity to be around 40 to 60%. And that's because when the particles, anybody breathes out these virus particles, more moisture in the air will make the air heavier, the droplets fall to the air quicker, they contact surfaces quicker, rather than just circulating around the air. And then obviously your regular cleaning will pick up any of those droplets that have hit the floor or hit surfaces. Being very mindful of distance in different groups. So as you configure your seating, the 2 meter rule is still applicable. So let's just explain that. What all the science tells us, 2 meters is still the distance that we're trying to aim for, both in the public setting and customers interacting with businesses. Naturally, there's been a huge amount of pressure from the hospitality industry to say that just isn't workable. We can't operate in that way, and that has been the driver to reducing that to 1 meter. That doesn't mean to say 1 meter is safe. Now that is why the rule is 1 meter plus. You can go down to 1 meter between different customer groups, between staff and customers, if you have other measures in place that help minimize transmission. Now, there's a range of examples that have given, they appear within the guidance. You will have seen them in the media and in what other European countries are already doing. Those are a range of things from seating people back to back. So you could be closer than 2 meters or even 1 meter in terms of staff working in kitchen if you're working back to back or side to side. Because remember, the risk is people talking and breathing, and that's when the virus particles come out of their mouth. So just changing how people work together, or how customers are facing. So you might have 2 tables of customers, they're all completely back to back. That's a measure that you've taken to try and minimize risk that would allow you to have those people back to back closer than 2 meters. You will have seen another option is perspex screen on tables. So 2 households are allowed to meet up indoors. So you might have a group of 6 people, but they're from 2 households. They're still being expected to try and keep 2 meters apart to socially distance. So you may need to use a perspex screen on your table to keep those 2 households separate, because they are closer than 2 meters when they're around the table. You need to think about one-way systems in and out the premise, but also toilets are a key risk point. You don't want people queuing for toilets. You need to think about, if there is a queue, which will happen naturally, how do you do that in a safe way? How can you ensure the queue doesn't affect where people are sitting or staff access to kitchens? So you really need to think about that level of detail. When you're configuring your seating, Let me see if I can bring up this, if I can share this picture to show you. So I'm going to try and share my screen a moment. Okay, can you see this okay, this table and chairs?
Mm.
Okay, so here you've got the seating. It has people a bit less than 2 meters away, but what they've done is the seating is in such a way that people aren't all directly facing the table, as they're each, you know, 2 of them are facing sideways and another person in the middle. The direction that they're facing is not direct in kind of face-to-face situation with the other 2 people. Now, this is kind of what we're talking about here is best practice. You know, this is the kind of level of detail that you're thinking about. Now, I fully appreciate that, particularly if people are drinking outdoors, it's going to be very difficult for people to stay in, keep seats and tables in a particular way. But by having tape marked on the floor, this will make it much easier for the individual sitting around the table to keep the seats in the right position, but it will then make it much easier also for your staff just to say, oh, can you just move your seat back to the original position? So this isn't easy, and obviously you want to make it as easy as possible for customers to comply with the way that you're trying to operate your business, but also to make it easier for staff to recorrect where seating or tables get moved out of place. So think about kind of floor markings to help that be easier. That would be indoors and outdoors. Okay, you will have seen about, can I just check? My colleague was going to join me. She usually talks about risk control and group limits. Ravina, are you also on the call, or David? If you just unmute yourself if you're currently muted. No? Okay.
I don't think they are, Paul. No, I can't see them.
Yeah, that's fine. Okay, so the other thing that you need to be mindful of is music. So music is a natural part of pubs and restaurants. Music, or you may have broadcasts. Music has to be kept at a minimum level. The reasoning is the louder somebody has to talk, the more virus particles can be transmitted. So you don't want to have to force your customers to talk louder over music. Playing something, recording music quietly is fine, but please be very mindful of sound levels for that reason. Group bookings, you need to be trying to keep, you'll have seen limits of 6 and 30. So our reading of that is that in certain places, like wedding ceremonies, you can't have more than 30 people, but that isn't necessary. There is no kind of government statutory limit on how many people could be coming to your business. So it's not like you have to keep a limit of 30 customers indoors and outdoors. That's where risk assessment kicks in. It will be completely individual down to the size of your business. Obviously, what is right for a business that has no or limited outdoor space will be very different for somebody that has a huge beer garden, which might be able to house safely, minding all the social distance rules, more than 50, 60 people. So it all depends on your particular setup. We need to be mindful of local residents, obviously, as we move outdoors, or even if you're just having to keep all your windows and doors open, suddenly there'll be more noise on the streets. We will get an increase in resident complaints, particularly over the summer, now where we've come out of lockdown. A lot of people have, will want to go out and enjoy themselves. We are taking a very pragmatic approach to this. This is the police and, regulators, all the way from the top level councillors, obviously the cabinet level, but certainly within a local level, councillors and senior management within councils want businesses to open safely. We will be taking a very pragmatic approach to noise complaints. We are expecting them. But whereas before you might have had, problems with serial complainants and perhaps decisions didn't always, go in your favor, the decision-making process in regards to noise complaints will be firmly in favor of businesses. We will be letting customers know that things are different. Everybody's in a very different situation now. They will have to expect more noise levels. That said, obviously, if you're operating after your license conditions, very late hours, or you're not taking reasonable steps to keep noise levels down, then we will have to come along. But wherever possible, we are there, and the police both have a very supportive role. We are there to kind of work with you and try and help you look at solutions to those problems. So generally speaking, as long as you're doing everything you can that's reasonable for your setup, for the size of your business, we will be supporting you as much as possible to help you find ways to make things work. Not just within your business, but obviously we want to keep your residents happy as well, because they may be your regular customers. And what we don't want is after lockdown to have annoyed those potentially loyal customers so much that they're put off coming back into your business. The other thing to talk about is advanced information. Okay, so obviously it's great news, businesses are opening up. Ideally, you've done all the risk assessments, you've done everything right to keep customers, staff safe. But the second step is you have to let your customers know. You may have already seen that there's about 40% of which members that were surveyed were saying they have a real fear of going back into shops. That's natural. We've had 3 months of fear. Just because shops are opening up, that doesn't eradicate that fear overnight. We've seen in the high streets, although you will have seen big spikes, hundreds of people queuing for the likes of Primark, the high streets are reporting that after the first few weeks that has dipped down. There is poor performance as things have kind of got back to normal. So people are still fearful. So you really need to work hard. This is a joint effort by businesses and government. We need to think about, how do you communicate to your customers that you've done your risk assessment, that you've thought about things to keep them safe? This is going to be critical to get those customers back in the doors as soon as possible. There's 4 or 5 things that you can do. After you've done the risk assessment, let your customers know. So there's a template government notice, stay safe, secure notice, but it's only a little A4 notice that can get easily lost when you display it in your shop window. So think about, step back. Imagine you're a customer just walking down the street. Whatever signage you're putting up there, would a customer walking by easily spot this notice? Would it attract their attention? So you can use the government notice, but you may want to have your own notice, your own poster, much larger, A3, whatever is right for your business. Something that will grab their attention, that lets them know we're now COVID secure. Yeah. And obviously you can have some lines to the effect that you've done the risk assessment. Perhaps you think about putting your risk assessment on your website. Now you might think, well, nobody wants to read a 20, 30 page long document. It's like terms and conditions. It's one of those documents. It's not very exciting, but people have a real fear. There might be people that are kind of sitting on the fence. They just want that confidence that you've done everything right. And for them, just displaying a poster saying we've done a risk assessment might not be enough to give them the confidence. Whereas seeing page by page your risk assessment will convince them that you have carefully thought through everything. So not everybody want to read it, but those that do, give them the option. Have it on your website, and wherever in all the ways that you communicate with your customers, link to that. So link to it in a poster in your shop window. On your tables, have something in there about that links to that document. In your social media, your email communications, wherever possible, think about giving people the opportunity to see that information. This might sound unusual, but if you look at all of the big high street chains, you'll see COVID, what are we doing to keep you safe, right there on the home page. And there's a link to a page that goes into detail about all the steps they've taken. So for a while, this is going to be quite normal. The other thing that's kind of unique to the restaurants, pub, hospitality industry is this 21 days record keeping. So because your industry is seen as a higher risk, we're now having people working 1 meter away in closed indoor spaces for a long period of time. There's definitely more risk there, and it's because of this that government has said, we need you to help us. So if we have an incident, a virus outbreak in your premise, help us make it easier to contact all of your customers, to get in touch, to trace those people, so we can get in place, so they can trace those and obviously do the steps to help keep those people safe. So you need to keep your customer records for 21 days, and it doesn't matter whether they're seating indoors or outdoors. The guidance even talks about, even if they're doing takeaway, you may think, well, that's less risk because it's just a case of coming in and out. But we know that's not always the case. Sometimes customers may need to wait. I've waited up to 20 minutes to collect a takeaway order. So they could be waiting and exposed to people, staff, and pick up the virus when they're doing a takeaway. So you're encouraged to take details of all customers, keep them for 21 days. You can use any existing software. So you might have OpenTable, that kind of software. It's fine to continue using that. If you don't have any existing software, pen and paper is fine. But as much as possible, think about minimizing it. So disinfecting the pen every so often, sticking to perhaps one member of staff that has that role in taking those details. You need to be thinking as much as possible about table service, having one member of staff interact with one table. So whereas before you might send one member of staff for drinks, another for food, that's a big no-no. You need to try and keep one person of staff being the one point of contact with that group. Or in terms of customer details, it is just name and phone number. Yeah, phone number rather than email, because we want to quickly be able to contact that individual. This is a health issue, so we don't want to be in a situation of writing or emailing somebody and waiting days to get a response to follow it up. If you've got a group of 2 households around a table, you just need one point of contact per household. Yeah, that should be sufficient. We don't want this to be overly burdensome. It just needs to be enough to allow us to get through to each household that's turned up. Yeah. Okay, that's probably the key things I wanted to speak about. Happy to take any questions now or after our representative from the police speaks.
Thank you, Paul. I think we'll park questions. I think there'll be multiple questions. You've covered a huge amount of ground there, so thank you very much. Really, really helpful. But let's go straight to the police, I think, and look at the other considerations. And if people can park their questions, if you want to start putting them in the chat room, then that just helps me get through them, because I will look at that and take you in turn. But in the meantime, let's move on then and welcome Steve Barr and Matt Bryan from the Metropolitan Police. And Steve is going to talk to us and take us through those considerations. Thank you, Steve. Welcome.
Good morning, everyone. First, a little disclaimer. We're not from the local police. We are counter-terrorism police officers, but we are responsible for the Southwest Basic Command Unit, which sounds very grand, but basically I'm Richmond and Matt's Wimbledon. He's your local officer. But what we're concerned about is that the threat from terrorism during this pandemic hasn't actually changed. All we are discovering as things change, businesses opening, and there's a lot of development, we're getting new vulnerabilities. And our major vulnerability has always been crowded places. And we're seeing, as we go through different phases, and some of you open in different steps, that those vulnerabilities are moving and appearing. And that's our concern, particularly from Saturday onwards as the hospitality sector opens up. And you're going to find that during the daytime, other businesses have been using spaces outside your areas, and there might be some conflict with queues and that kind of thing. And to be honest, we don't know what's going to happen as you open up. We don't know what kind of queues are going to develop, and there's going to be a great responsibility to manage that. And that's a really important part to consider. We know it's going to change, and you're going to get better at it as you go on, as you see how things develop, and as you don't all open at the same time. I know you're not all opening on Saturday, so it's going to change as different, competitors, other businesses open around you, but you've got to be mindful of it. I know some of you have probably seen this presentation before. It only takes a few minutes, but I'm going to try and share it now. There we go. The threat to the UK remains substantial, which means that each day an attack is likely. There is no information to suggest that Wimbledon has been targeted. There's no intelligence to suggest that anything's going to happen imminently. But as we saw in Reading just a few days ago, we don't know when it's going to happen. It's important to remember that this particular threat hasn't gone away whilst we're dealing with all the other things. What we're concerned about is that as you're being encouraged is to move your business outside wherever possible, that creates a new vulnerability or an extra vulnerability where people are going to be on the road and on the streets queuing and indeed eating and drinking. And our concern that you need to think about is the likelihood of vehicle attacks. Where are you putting those queues? Are they near the road? Is there any barriers in place? And those barriers or street furniture aren't going to be rated. They're not going to be designed to stop a vehicle as a weapon attack. But what they will be is a visible deterrent. So if you can imagine that somebody was planning to conduct an attack in Wimbledon and they came just for a simple drive through the town centre, would your queue look the most vulnerable of all the queues in the town centre? And that's what you really need to stop. And I think one of the great weapons in that is going to be managing people's expectations. If you've got a queue a mile long and you know that those people are never going to get into your premises, then really you need to go out and put a "don't queue any further" signs and explain to them. I think that's going to be good business for you anyway, because people are going to be more annoyed having waited for hours not to get in than being told there is no chance you're going to get in. I know you're going to be using different approaches with booking systems, or whether it is just a queuing system. But if you know that people are never going to get in, then don't let those people carry the risk by just standing on the street for a long time. What we are concerned about is that vehicle as a weapon attacks, basically all anyone needs is a car, and that's the great risk to it. Once you've got a car, you can commit these attacks, and what we've historically seen is that they're then followed up with a bladed weapon attack, and you can imagine how that might look. So just a few things to consider. These documents will all be shared with you afterwards, so there's no need to read them now, but just to consider that any barrier is better than no barrier at all. And as things develop, don't just think, it worked last Saturday, it'll be fine next Friday, because the queues are going to be different, and you're going to need to manage those queues. And if you're operating booking systems, what are you going to do with people in that time when they arrive and the other people haven't left yet? Is there going to be a designated waiting area, and where is the safest place to put that waiting area? Matt's going to talk you through the PSO Shield App, which is a free resource that you're all entitled to, and it's very, very easy to get onto. So Matt, if you're there.
Yep, cheers, Steve. The other thing, again, we can send out the attachment after this meeting, but the PSO Shield App, it's a thing that it's been developed, and it's the London Shield App. It's an innovative and interactive app. You can get it for free. Just go on to App Store or Google Play. You will download it. Can you actually show the front screen on your thing there, Steve? Just so people can see what it looks like when you download it. Yeah, same as any other app, it's completely free. The idea is to provide relevant, up-to-date advice, guidance, and information to help strengthen London and Londoners from attack. There are several things on there, particularly for business. What we will have is information on there regarding the current threat, which we just spoke about, any documentation or posters or signage that you might need for the inside of your store that you can then print off. You can also then so there you go. So the picture you see on the screen now, this is kind of thing it'll look like when it's open. Also, and quite importantly, you can go on to the notifications and get bulletin reports. So for argument's sake, with the incident that happened in Reading, as soon as that information comes out, you will get a bulletin on this app to let you know what's going on, what groups are being affected, what advice is there for you to follow. So particularly if it's something that's happening in the area or in your particular field of business, it'll be good to get on there and have sort of quick access to the most up-to-date information on what they're being advised to do. Also on there, we've got, so with the library of information, you've got the guidance documents, publicity material, you've got the bulletins. Also on there is COVID-19 advice. So again, a handy thing to dovetail into the health and safety aspect. What they're advising, and this gets updated quite regularly. So as well as that, sorry, I'm just flicking onto my next page so I can see. So yeah, so you've got quite a ream of information there for you to look at, but as well as that, you can also report incidents. So obviously anything that's happening then and there in front of you, emergency, 999 as always, that hasn't finished. But if you've got a little niggle or a little bit of information, or I think this may be of interest, you can go on this app and there is online reporting that you can do for any information you think that may be relevant, that we may need to know. And then that comes through to us as well. So it's a really, really handy app. Most of the stuff on there you can share externally. And also, because it's free, the only thing you need to do is when you go onto the App Store or Google Play to download it, it will ask you for your login information. This will then get sent to our central department. They will then obviously record you as having the app and then send you back all of your login details and password you need. What we advise is if you can share this with as many people as possible, if you've got your members of staff got it, then at least that way, if anything happens on the way to work, post work, around work, they're getting this up-to-date information. You're happy and confident that your workers and staff are getting the up-to-date information. And as well as that, on there is different online packages and stuff they can look at and just make themselves aware of what's going on. So it's, like I said, it's a really, really good app. It's something that's been developed for a while now and we're quite happy with it. Completely free, which is always a bonus. And like I said, you can share quite a lot of this information. That is it for the app. And I think that's pretty much for us. It was just a quick, short and sweet update and threat update. Like I said, we have been doing these with the retail sector and the sort of nighttime economy and the restaurant sector as they open, and we're going to try and continue the new normal. That is going to be this now. So yeah, if you, after this, if anyone wants any more information or any follow-up documentation or anything, then just let us know. And again, we're happy for questions, or if you want to leave it till the end, we'll be online.
Great, thank you. I'm going to come in there because, and thank you both, Steve and Matt, for that. And yeah, very sobering thoughts, but necessary actions, aren't they, that we all need to consider. So I'm going to open up for questions, and I am conscious we've only got about 10 minutes for questions. So I just want to say welcome at this point to Helen Clark-Bell from Love Wimbledon, obviously representing the businesses in Wimbledon Town Centre, and Sarah Xavier from the Future Merton team. So we are going to take about just over 10 minutes of questions, and then as I say, Paul will then be opting out, and we will hear from Steve from Safety Delivery and Sylvia from Sylvia Anderson Consultancy, who's just arrived. Welcome, Sylvia, on how they can help you. So I'm going to, if you don't mind, the ones that you've put in chat, I will just ask because it will save us a few minutes. And I think if I don't represent your question correctly, then please put me. So Paul, you can actually see these in the chat one. So the first one I'm going to ask is from Dinar Somji, which is about the guidance on how food should be served. So this is obviously about the cleanliness, isn't it, of glasses, cutlery, plates and handling and all of that. Yeah. So a few minutes on that, please, if you can.
Okay. There will be a link round to this government guidance document, which does include all of this. It's very, very detailed. I'd like to say everything's been thought out. It seems everything's been thought out, including food and cutlery. So the key thing is about minimizing the transmission as much as possible, minimizing handling of food, cutlery, condiments. And so it's a big no-no putting cutlery or condiments out on tables, because, you know, people come, they might sit down, touch, they might walk away. What you need to do is you need to give those out at the time food's being served. So this is included in the government guidance. The other thing they mention is washing hands before handling plates and cutlery, that's staff that is, before they're given to the customers. So yeah, I mean that's that in a nutshell, really.
Yeah.
Table should be clear. The only thing on your table is there should be some information about how people can order via table. So whether that's an app or option of phone in, ideally having some ordering software, or staff are obviously coming up when they first take the customer's details, and that one member of staff at the time then takes the details and then takes the food order. Wherever possible, think about minimizing contact between people and between services, both staff and customers. The next, well, just move on to the next question about PPE.
Yeah, please.
Are there any guidelines affecting PPE for staff and customers? Example, face coverings indoors for people serving food. This also is covered in the guidance. The PPE, so just to kind of differentiate here, because the terminology is kind of mixed up in media and other settings we've seen. PPE is about protecting yourself. This is you know, proper face masks, ventilators, eye protection. That protects the user, the wearer, whereas face coverings that we're all being encouraged to wear when we are on public transport, that protects everybody else around you. So the face covering isn't, you know, hasn't been scientifically tested about how effective it is. It's not been a product that stops you breathing in virus particles. And that's why the idea is that if everybody on a tube, a bus wears face coverings, nobody is spreading those virus particles from themselves to anybody else around them in their vicinity. So with that said, PPE is really is restricted to those who had to use PPE before COVID came along. Dust masks, you know, for example, if you're in a building site, or for those in a medical setting exposed to a much higher risk, or those that government have identified as being in a very high risk setting, for example, immigration services. So everybody else, if you didn't need to use PPE before, you're not being encouraged to use it now. What you are doing instead is a number of measures to minimize risk, which are all detailed within this guidance that we'll be sending a link around after the webinar. But for example, that is having in a kitchen setting where staff are in a closed space, working back to back, the kitchen being well ventilated, maintaining humidity at the recommended levels, regular hand washing, where staff need to work closer together, for example, lifting heavy equipment, you're pairing those staff, and it always be that same two individuals that work together. So you're really thinking about grouping staff together for certain tasks. You're much more mindful about shift patterns. So if one member of staff in a group caught it in the morning shift, they're not mixing up doing evening shifts and passing it on to others. You're thinking about when they come in, your staff come in from public transport where they're wearing their own face covering, they need to dispose of that safely in a bag before they come into work. In terms of face coverings, government guidance, and certainly at local level, we'd say that if people are worried, naturally, and that will include your staff. If staff want to wear a face covering, you need to recognize that there is a fear there. That's something that should be considered. There is a bit of guidance that I'll send around because not all face coverings are the same. Some protect, stop 1%, some up to 80% of virus particles being released when you're talking, when you're coughing, etc. So there'll be a link so you can get some information on the kind of materials that are best used in face coverings if you or your staff wish to purchase or make your own.
Good, thank you. And just quickly with the record keeping, you know, I don't know how pubs are meant to do that when people haven't booked and it's sort of easy come, easy go. So that's the first thing. And is this record keeping pen and paper, or has it got to be electronic, or any guidelines on that, Paul?
So the guidance is, obviously we want to make this as the least burdensome as possible. Yeah, it's not about just pushing burdens, but it needs to be something that works for you, something that's manageable. There is no direction. It has to be pen and paper versus online. If wherever possible, use the existing software you have. So even though pubs, there will be people that just rock up and they're come for a drink. Pubs typically also serve food, may already have kind of food reservation software that they have. So use that, yeah? If you imagine people just turn up for a drink, they sit at a table, because there should be no bar service, yeah? There shouldn't be anybody coming to the bar, queuing at the bar. People need to be sat down at a table. If you have already top table, you would have a little link on the table saying, please register your details here. That's one option, as long as your staff can easily check that table number 6 has registered the details, for example. So it depends what you have in place already. If you haven't got anything in place, you may already be aware of, there's lots of table reservation software out there, all different costs. Use whatever works for you. Pen and paper may be the easiest thing that works for you. Just be aware of how you minimize the risks around that.
Lovely, thank you. And then we have one really about reusable cups. Obviously, there's big concern about the sort of, we've gone backwards in terms of the use of plastic. So any news on the use of reusable cups?
Yes, I did see that. I saw that report touched on. I have not looked at. I'll need to come back to you on that one.
Yeah, it's the same actually, Paul, as Dinar's just asked about menus, whether they need to be disposable or reusable. It's the same thing, isn't it? Because it's about the hygiene, touching, and all of this on those things. So, what about menus? Have you got anything on those?
Okay, I will check the guidance.
Yeah.
I suspect it doesn't go down to that
No.
level of detail, but what I would say is, and I'll come back with a comprehensive answer, ideally menus, if they're plastic covered, you know, like cutlery, you're using a disinfectant wipe over them. If they're paper, that may not be as easy to do. So you need to really think about how you minimize that as much as possible. So let me come back.
Yeah,
With an answer once I spoke to the EH colleagues on that.
Okay, that's great. And also in terms of, actually this is more for Stephen and Matt, these barriers, I don't, where's the investment? How does the local authority and the control on that when you're going onto the public realm? Is there any guidance on that? You know, there's lots of places where the street is right onto the road, isn't it? So what are they going to do? Put up little cones along the curbside, or do you see what I mean?
A lot of places have done that already,
okay.
as things have opened.
Okay.
A lot of the bid teams have been involved in that, and that is probably true. What we're more saying is that I know that there's been a lot of pressure to clear footways, but we're more saying that the natural barriers, the street furniture, is actually important and can be a visible deterrent. And there can be a huge difference if you actually think about it for a minute in just the positioning of your crowds. If you put them straight after a long straight bit of road, then it makes them a much more viable target. Whereas if they're actually after the bend when any vehicle would have naturally had to slow down, that's the sort of thing we're asking to consider. So it's more natural barriers. Obviously, going forward, we don't know how long this is going to last. There is, I know, investment in the short, medium and long term in barrier assets. And if anyone is actually concerned about those, we also have counterterrorism security advisors who are qualified in that advice and which barriers they can actually erect and where they go.
Right, that's lovely. That's very helpful. Right, I think we've covered the majority of the questions. So does anyone else have anything that I haven't represented correctly that they'd like to ask Paul or the police representatives? If not, I'll say thank you to Paul. If you can come back to us on that. And Paul, we've got a single email contact, haven't we, in your team that people can make contact with?
Yes, we've got one contact into the team. So depending on what the query is, it'll go to our licensing EH team as relevant.
Yeah, lovely.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, we've got through so much there, Paul. It is a minefield, isn't it? So thank you so much. You rattled through it, and the devil is in the detail, I think. But thank you for today. And yeah, we'll see you tomorrow, won't we, at our next one? So that's lovely.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay,
Bye.
right, everyone. We now have in the audience, we also have, as I say, Sylvia from Sylvia Anderson Consultancy and Steve Bennett from Safety Delivery. Got that right, didn't I, Steve? So I don't know which one of you wants to go first. Sylvia, I can see you. So shall I just ask you to say a few words and then I'll come to you, Steve?
Okay, good morning, everybody. So we've been working behind the scenes for the last few weeks, and we have launched a brand new service called COVID-19 Safe to Serve. And we've already been delivering this in Westminster because most of our clients, our restaurants and our hotels are based there. And what it is, we've taken the guidance of the government and we have put bespoke hospitality and catering risk assessments together for takeaways, for front of house, for waitresses, for back of house, for chefs, everybody in the team. And then we have gone to the restaurants on site, or we've also done remote audits, and we have given them the guidance. We've done a self-audit with them. They make sure that they put all the guidance through. We then go and check it. And then what happens, they get a certificate and a sticker which they can put next to their food hygiene rating in the front door. Caroline's already seen this and she can send you the link of the service. And then it gives public confidence that it has been checked by a qualified safety and hygiene expert. And that will make the difference, because at the moment, too many people are opening up on the 4th and they have got put no controls into place. They think it's quite easy just to open up the doors and let people come in, but they haven't checked their kitchens for like 3 months. You know, you've got pest issues, cleaning, disinfection, you know, there's food that's been found rotting in fridges and freezers and dry stores. It's a big job. I mean, most of my clients are going to officially open their reservation lines to take bookings, but they're not opening up until the 1st of August or the 1st of September once they've implemented the right controls and they can give the public, you know, a safe reason to come and visit their place.
Sylvia, that's, you know, if you go once and you have a bad experience, you're not going to go back, are you?
No.
And actually, we heard from Paul about how forensic actually some customers will be in wanting to understand what has taken place before they're willing to book. So
it's all about hygiene and safety.
Yeah. So that's great advice. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to move swiftly to Steve then. Welcome, Steve. Over to you.
Hello, yes, and thank you to all our speakers. I think that, again, Dinah, that's been extremely useful for everyone watching in. Paul's advice and our counter-terrorism officers, another very good session. And again, Sylvia there delving down a little bit more into the food hygiene aspect, which is extremely important. I'd just like to really underline what we've already heard, particularly about one of the themes of this was the confidence of customers, and the fact that 40% of people really aren't thinking about, I don't want to go back to shopping, I don't want to go to restaurants, I don't feel safe. And the 5 steps poster is one of the key things that that restaurants and shops can use, and they really need to see this in thank you very much. Yeah, what you should do is look at this a bit like let's say with sort of the food safety, where you've got the food safety agencies, food hygiene ratings. Businesses will be very keen to put that in the front of their doors and windows. They already have done over the years, because they want to demonstrate to customers that, you should come in here because we've got this rating. Hopefully what we'll see is with this poster will serve the same purpose. It will give the confidence to customers to go into that shop. And what we need to persuade shops and restaurants to do is to use this as a tool, if you like. And it's not just a tool, but as you can see, it does demonstrate that risk assessments have been done, that these measures are being taken. And it also shows that it's an enforceable issue, because there you see the health and safety executive named at the bottom as the contact, the website and the telephone number. So it serves the purpose of showing that not only should you be confident about coming in, but this shows that also if we're not acting safely and we don't adhere to all the rules, then we're facing enforceability. So I think that's very key to businesses sort of retaining, maintaining and gaining confidence. So that's my main message.
Lovely, thank you, Steve. So for those in the audience, both Steve and Sylvia are chamber members. They're obviously here to help you. So if you don't have their details, I don't know if we've got them at the end on the end slide, but we have, I think. We'll obviously let you have those. And I think just to wrap up, if you do have any other questions, obviously we're happy to post those on to you through to the team at Merton Council. And obviously, as I say, we will also, there is an email which I'm not sure we have for the Regulatory Services Partnership, but I know they have a single point of contact, so we need to get that out to you. Now, I just want to say a couple of things that Caroline's swiftly moved through, but we are doing another session of these tomorrow, which is about what is called close contact businesses, which is, I think, a bit unfair actually, because I think hairdressers are close contact businesses and they are allowed to open, but these are for people that are not allowed to open yet, and we still don't have a date for those, but that's obviously for people that do nails, massages, fitness gyms, etc. So still a lot of businesses that aren't able to reopen. I just wanted to say to you, to remind you that if you haven't been able to get any of the grants available through Merton Council, they have recently reopened their phase 2 opening for their local discretionary grants, and that is really for businesses that have under a £51,000 rateable value, that haven't had any small business rate relief, that can illustrate they've had a significant fall in income and have high fixed costs. So that opportunity is there. There is money in that pot, and I think the closing date on that is the 14th of July, but that's all available on the Merton Council, merton.gov.uk, and if you go to discretionary grants, you'll find that. We're also encouraging businesses to promote in a digital way, and the council has launched a shop local section on its website, and one of the sites on there is myvirtualneighbourhood.com, which I think is a free listing where we would encourage you just to get on there. You never know what traction that might give for you. And obviously our whole sort of message from both the Chamber of the Commerce and certainly from Love Wimbledon, Helen's had to move on to another meeting, is to shop local. Think local, act local, shop local. That's what we would love to do. So I just wanted to say that we will send out the recording of this And I think it was, my goodness me, the detail in that is substantial, isn't it? And some tricky things. So any of the hospitality businesses that have attended today, if you do require some more guidance or discussion around those things, I know that the team at Merton Council will be very happy. That was the overall message. They are wanting to help, not to do compliance. So that's the team there is very dedicated to that. So I'd just like to say thank you to everyone. Well, we are a little over time, but we have rattled through, I think, a huge amount of content. Those that are reopening, I wish you the very best of luck. We obviously want to see every business getting back into business and doing as well as you can in these challenging times. So I hope today has been helpful, and we'll be in touch and see you at another webinar, one tomorrow if you're interested in that, but otherwise we'll see you very soon. So thank you, and thank you to all our speakers today. Great, thank you. Take care, everyone.